My name is Dakota Reynolds, 37 years old, watching my father's face drain of color at our lavish Christmas dinner. Moments earlier, he had proudly announced I was disinherited, prompting enthusiastic high fives from my siblings. I simply sipped my wine and suggested he check his bank account. Now, staring at his phone screen, showing a zero balance, his hand trembles uncontrollably. The empire he built is no longer under his control. Before I tell you how we got here, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to join my journey of family betrayal and redemption. The Reynolds name meant something in the hospitality world. My father, William Reynolds, 68 years old with steel gray hair and an even steelier personality, built the Reynolds luxury hotels from nothing, expanding to 36 properties across 12 countries. His success story was legendary, the embodiment of the American dream, a self-made man who transformed a single struggling motel into an international brand, synonymous with opulence. But behind the carefully crafted public image of a loving family business lay a household fractured by ego, favoritism, and emotional neglect. My mother, Eleanor, gone 5 years now, was the heart of our family. Warm where my father was cold, generous where he was calculating. Her smile could light up the darkest corners of our massive home. I inherited her eyes and, she always said, her sensitivity to others. Perhaps that was my first strike in my father's ledger of disappointments. My older brother, Vincent, 42, was the golden child despite his obvious flaws. A business degree from Harvard that our father paid considerable donations to secure, followed by a series of executive positions in the company, where he did remarkably little. Vincent developed a talent for taking credit for others' work and deflecting blame for his numerous failures. His expense accounts were legendary among the accounting staff, who had strict instructions never to question them. Sophia, 39, my older sister, was a master manipulator. Where Vincent was obvious in his entitlement, Sophia operated in shadows and whispers. She could turn my father against anyone with a few carefully placed comments, suggesting disloyalty or incompetence without ever making direct accusations. She managed our hotel's marketing with mediocre results, but exceptional skill at claiming every minor success as a personal triumph. Then there was Bianca, 34, the baby of the family and my father's undeniable favorite. She contributed nothing to the business except appearing at events looking perfect and charming investors. Her actual job title, Director of Guest Experience, was a fancy way of saying she occasionally visited properties to complain about the service and redecorate presidential suites to her taste, all on the company dime. And me? I was the third child, the forgotten middle son. From childhood, I understood I would need to work twice as hard for half the recognition. While my siblings received praise for mere existence, I needed exceptional achievements just to be acknowledged. Growing up in the Reynolds household meant constant evaluation. Dinner conversations centered around business performance and future expansion. My father treated these discussions like board meetings, expecting presentations rather than family conversation. "Dakota," he would say, "Vincent closed the Singapore deal today. What have you accomplished?" The fact that I was 15 and Vincent was 20 meant nothing in these comparisons. There was the summer I worked incognito as a busboy in one of our hotels, learning operations from the ground up. I created a 30-page report on improving efficiency and guest satisfaction based on my observations. My father glanced at it for 30 seconds before pushing it aside, saying he didn't have time for school projects. The next day, I overheard him praising Vincent for suggesting a minor change to our check-in process that he'd overheard from a manager. Mother was different. She saw me. While father demanded excellence in business, she taught me excellence of character. The measure of success isn't in your bank account, she would tell me. It's in how you treat people who can do nothing for you. She would take me to community centers where we would serve meals, or to employee functions where she knew everyone's names, their children's names, their struggles and triumphs. When cancer took her, it felt like losing my only ally, During her final days, as she lay in the hospital bed we had arranged in her favorite room overlooking the garden, she made me promise something. "The company is more than buildings and balance sheets," she whispered, holding my hand with what strength she had left. "It's people's livelihoods, their security, their futures. Your father and the others. They're losing sight of that. Promise me you'll protect what truly matters." I promised, not fully understanding then what she was asking. It was only later, as I watched my siblings and father dismantle her legacy of compassion piece by piece, that I began to comprehend the weight of her words. The day we laid her to rest was the last time I saw my father cry. He grieved deeply, but briefly. Within weeks, he was back to his ruthless self, perhaps even harder, as if emotion was a weakness he couldn't afford to display again. For me, the loss created a void that seemed impossible to fill. Mother had been my buffer, my interpreter in a family that seemed to speak a different language than I did. Without her, family gatherings became battlefields. Holiday dinners were strategic engagements where alliances formed and shifted between courses. Business meetings became forums for my siblings to undermine my contributions. My father watched it all, with detached amusement, occasionally stoking conflicts with comments like, "Interesting approach, Dakota. But Vincent's idea seems more practical," even when we had suggested essentially the same thing. Every success I achieved was minimized, every setback magnified. I earned an MBA with highest honors while working full-time in hotel operations. My father noted that Vincent had finished his degree a year earlier. I developed a loyalty program that increased return bookings by 23%. My father worried it was giving away too much. I modernized our property management system, saving millions annually. My father questioned why I was wasting time on back-office matters. The pattern was clear and unchanging. No achievement would ever be enough. No contribution would ever be valued. I was the odd piece in the Reynolds family puzzle, never quite fitting no matter how I tried to reshape myself. My breaking point came during a quarterly executive meeting 3 years ago. Despite my graduate degree and 7 years of dedicated service in various roles throughout the company, my father assigned me to manage a single struggling property in Detroit, while Vincent oversaw international development and Sophia controlled our entire marketing division. Bianca, of course, continued her role of spending company money and attending parties. The Detroit hotel was bleeding money, suffered from deteriorating infrastructure, and had the lowest employee retention rate in our entire portfolio. It wasn't a job. It was a setup for failure. "Consider it a character-building exercise," my father said when I questioned the assignment. "If you can turn that property around, maybe we'll discuss expanding your responsibilities." I knew then it was a test I wasn't meant to pass. Even if I performed a miracle, the goalposts would move again. Vincent smirked from across the conference table. Sophia examined her manicure with affected boredom. Bianca wasn't even present, having decided a spa day was more important than company strategy. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. I drafted my resignation letter, reviewed it a dozen times, and placed it on my father's desk before anyone arrived the next morning. His reaction was explosive. He called me into his office, face flushed with anger. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, waving my resignation letter. "Exactly what it looks like," I replied, maintaining my composure despite my racing heart. "My 2 weeks' notice. This is how you repay everything I've given you? This company is your birthright." I almost laughed. "My birthright? You've made it abundantly clear that this company belongs to Vincent and Sophia. I'm just occupying space. So you're running away because you didn't get your way? Typical Dakota, always too sensitive." His words stung, but I stood my ground. I'm not running away. I'm choosing to build something on my own terms, where my contributions are valued. Where exactly do you think you'll go? Who would hire a Reynolds to work for the competition? The condescension in his voice solidified my resolve. "I guess we'll find out." He leaned forward, eyes cold. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back with open arms. Loyalty means something in this family. Does it? I asked quietly. Because from where I stand, loyalty seems to flow in only one direction. I walked out that day to a chorus of speculation. Vincent told anyone who would listen that I had cracked under pressure. Sophia implied I was joining a competitor to leak family secrets. Bianca cried dramatically about family betrayal. My father simply said I was dead to him. Starting over was terrifying. The Reynolds name opened doors, but it also created expectations and suspicions. Was I a corporate spy? A spoiled rich kid playing at independence? Few took me seriously at first. I eventually found a position with Meridian Hotels, our main competitor, though several rungs down from my previous role. My new boss, Jackson Taylor, made it clear he was taking a chance on me. "Prove you're more than your last name," he said bluntly during my interview. "Show me you're here to work, not gather intelligence or wait for daddy to call you home." I started as an operations consultant, traveling to struggling properties to implement improvements. The work was grueling. 18-hour days, constant travel, dealing with resistant managers and suspicious employees. But for the first time, I was being judged solely on my results. 6 months in, I revitalized 3 failing properties. After a year, I had developed a reputation for turning around the most challenging situations. My approach differed fundamentally from my father's. Where he ruled through fear and micromanagement, I empowered staff and rebuilt morale. Where he cut corners to boost short-term profits, I invested in people and guest experience to ensure long-term success. My promotion to regional director came after 18 months. Director of operations followed 6 months later. By my 3rd year away from Reynolds Luxury Hotels, I was Meridian's youngest executive vice president of development, overseeing our most aggressive expansion period in company history. The industry took notice. Hospitality Today named me one of their 40 under 40 innovators. Business Weekly did a feature on my management philosophy. I was invited to speak at conferences where, just a few years earlier, only my father had been considered worthy of the spotlight. My success came from more than ambition or spite, though both certainly fueled late nights and difficult decisions. I genuinely loved this industry and understood it in ways my family never had. I saw hotels not as properties to be exploited, but as ecosystems where every role mattered. The housekeeper who took pride in perfect rooms, the maintenance worker who fixed problems before guests noticed, the front desk staff who remembered returning guests by name. These were the true assets, not the marble lobbies or designer furniture. I built a reputation for ethical leadership and innovation. My team was fiercely loyal because I demonstrated loyalty first. I shared credit generously and took responsibility for failures. I remembered birthdays, asked about children, attended weddings and funerals. These weren't strategies. They were values my mother had instilled that turned out to be surprisingly effective business practices. Through it all, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Occasional text messages with Bianca, who was the least openly hostile. Brief, awkward encounters at industry events with Vincent or my father, who would acknowledge me with cold nods before moving to different corners of the room. Sophia simply pretended I didn't exist. I told myself I had moved on. That the ache I felt when seeing my father across crowded ballrooms was just lingering disappointment, not longing for reconciliation. I convinced myself that my drive to succeed was about personal fulfillment, not a desperate need to prove my worth to a man who had never truly seen me. But then came the call that would change everything. It was a Tuesday evening in October when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was a sales call after a long day of meetings. Something made me answer. Dakota Reynolds. My voice carried the weariness of back-to-back budget discussions. "Mr. Reynolds, you don't know me personally, but I know you by reputation." The woman's voice was hushed, nervous. My name is Patricia Wilkins. I've been the assistant controller at Reynolds Luxury Hotels for 11 years. My body tensed immediately. Company policy strictly prohibited financial staff from contacting family members, especially estranged ones. Ms. Wilkins, I'm no longer affiliated with Reynolds Hotels. If this is a business matter, you should speak with the appropriate executives. That's precisely why I'm calling you, she said, urgency breaking through her professional tone. The appropriate executives are the problem. She proceeded to outline a disturbing pattern. Over the past 2 years, cash reserves had been depleted at an alarming rate. Vincent had established shell companies that charged the hotel group excessive fees for consulting services never actually rendered. Sophia had routed marketing funds through agencies owned by friends who kicked back portions of the inflated contracts. Most concerning, my father was signing off on all of it, either unaware or unconcerned with the financial hemorrhaging. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Your mother always said you were the only one who truly cared about the company beyond what it could give you," Patricia replied. "And frankly, I'm worried about my pension and those of hundreds of other employees. The company won't survive another year at this rate." After swearing me to secrecy regarding her identity, Patricia promised to send secure files documenting her claims. We established a private communication channel, and within hours, my laptop contained enough evidence to send chills down my spine. Sleep evaded me that night as I pored over financial statements, bank transfers, and corporate minutes. The picture they painted was grim. Reynolds Luxury Hotels, once the pinnacle of financial stability in our industry, was teetering on insolvency. Worse, the decline had accelerated dramatically after my departure. I needed more information, details Patricia couldn't access from her position. The next morning, I contacted Howard Drake, a former FBI forensic accountant, who now ran a private investigation firm specializing in corporate malfeasance. "I need absolute discretion," I told him, during our initial meeting in a private dining room at a restaurant, far from both our offices. "This involves my family." Howard was the epitome of professionalism, asking pointed questions without judgment. "Family businesses are always complicated," was his only personal comment as he reviewed my preliminary materials. "I'll need 3 weeks for a thorough investigation." Those weeks felt endless. I went through the motions of my daily responsibilities at Meridian, while my mind constantly returned to the potential collapse of my family's legacy. I thought of the thousands of employees whose livelihoods would vanish, the communities that depended on our hotels as economic anchors, the shame my mother would feel seeing her husband and children destroy what she had helped build. Howard's final report exceeded my worst fears. Vincent had embezzled nearly $27 million through his fraudulent consulting arrangements. Sophia's marketing kickback scheme had diverted another $18 million. Bianca's redecorating projects and personal expenses charged to the company totaled $11 million over 3 years. But the most alarming discovery was the state of operations. Maintenance had been deferred across all properties to cut costs, creating safety hazards and deteriorating guest experiences. Long-term employees had been replaced with undertrained staff, willing to work for less. Vendor relationships built over decades had been sacrificed for marginal short-term savings. Customer reviews were plummeting. Occupancy rates had declined for 7 consecutive quarters. 3 major lending institutions were considering calling their loans due to covenant violations. 2 properties were already in technical default. In my professional opinion, Howard concluded in our final meeting, Reynolds Luxury Hotels has approximately 4 to 6 months before bankruptcy becomes inevitable. The only thing keeping creditors at bay is the family name and reputation, which is rapidly eroding. I sat in stunned silence, digesting the magnitude of the disaster. And my father? Does he understand the situation? Howard adjusted his glasses. "Based on meeting minutes and correspondence we've obtained, your brother and sister have been presenting heavily edited financial reports. However, there are indications that Mr. Reynolds has been willfully ignoring red flags. He signed off on transactions that any experienced business person would question. Why? I asked, more to myself than Howard. Why would he risk everything he's built? That's beyond the scope of my investigation, Howard replied diplomatically. But in my experience, founders often struggle to maintain proper oversight as they age, particularly when family dynamics complicate business relationships. He left me with a comprehensive dossier, digital and paper copies of all evidence, analysis of legal vulnerabilities, and a timeline of the company's decline. The weight of it felt physical as I carried it back to my apartment. That night, I received another call from Patricia. Her voice trembled as she spoke. They've scheduled an emergency board meeting for December 26th, the day after Christmas. The agenda includes a vote on selling the entire hotel group to Cambridge Investments for pennies on the dollar. Cambridge Investments was a notorious private equity firm known for acquiring distressed companies, stripping their assets, and discarding the remains. That makes no sense, I argued. The company is still salvageable with proper management. Even in its current state, it's worth far more than fire sale prices. That's not all. Patricia continued. I've discovered communications suggesting Vincent and Sophia have negotiated personal consulting contracts with Cambridge post-acquisition. They stand to make millions, while everyone else loses everything. The picture became crystal clear. My siblings weren't merely incompetent. They were actively working to undermine the company for personal gain. My father, whether from denial, diminished capacity, or simple exhaustion, was allowing it to happen. The annual family Christmas dinner is still happening? I asked. An idea forming. Yes, at your father's estate. All executives and board members are invited for dinner on Christmas Eve, with the formal board meeting scheduled for the 26th. Thank you, Patricia. I know the risk you're taking by sharing this information. Just fix it, Mr. Reynolds, she replied simply. For all of us. As I hung up, I stared at the city lights visible from my window. The company my parents built, that supported thousands of families, that had been meant to be our shared legacy, was being dismantled from within by greed and short-sightedness. Mother's words echoed in my mind. Promise me you'll protect what truly matters. The time had come to fulfill that promise, whether my family wanted me to or not. The next morning, I requested an urgent meeting with my father. His assistant sounded surprised to hear from me but scheduled a 30-minute slot 2 days later. The brief window spoke volumes about my standing in the family hierarchy. Walking into the Reynolds corporate headquarters for the first time in 3 years felt surreal. The building remained impressive, 36 stories of glass and steel overlooking Central Park, but small details betrayed decline. Slightly worn carpeting, fewer front desk staff, a broken digital display in the lobby. Security eyed me suspiciously as I checked in, whispering into their radios as I crossed the marble expanse to the executive elevators. My father's office occupied the entire top floor, a space designed to intimidate visitors with its panoramic views and excessive scale. His assistant, a new face I didn't recognize, escorted me into the cavernous corner office where William Reynolds sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a conference table. He didn't stand when I entered, didn't offer his hand, simply gestured to a chair positioned at a calculated distance. Dakota, this is unexpected. His voice carried the same authoritative tone I remembered, though new lines marked his face, and his hair had whitened considerably. Thank you for seeing me, Father. I placed my briefcase on his desk and met his gaze directly. We need to discuss the company's financial situation. His expression hardened. Our company is doing just fine without your input. Is it? I removed a folder containing key documents from Howard's investigation, because according to these financial statements, Reynolds Hotels is 3/4 away from bankruptcy. For a fraction of a second, surprise flickered across his face before his mask of confidence returned. You've been gone 3 years. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know that Vincent has embezzled $27 million through fake consulting companies. I know Sophia has been taking kickbacks from marketing vendors. I know our properties are deteriorating while expenses soar and revenues plummet. I laid out document after document. Bank transfers, shell company registrations, vendor contracts with inflated fees, maintenance reports showing critical systems in need of immediate repair. "Where did you get these?" he demanded, not denying their contents. "That's irrelevant. What matters is their accuracy, which you're not disputing." He leaned back, studying me with cold calculation. "What exactly do you want, Dakota? Money? A position back in the company? Revenge for perceived slights?" "I want to save what you and Mother built." I outlined a restructuring plan that would require immediate leadership changes, financial controls, and operational overhauls. Vincent and Sophia need to step down. Their mismanagement and fraud have brought us to this precipice. My father's laugh was bitter. "So, that's it. Sweep in as the conquering hero, push out your siblings, and take control. This is about your ego. This is about survival." I pushed the final document toward him, a projection showing complete collapse within 6 months if current practices continued. Thousands of employees will lose their livelihoods. The Reynolds name will be synonymous with failure and fraud. "Is that the legacy you want?" His face flushed with anger. "The legacy I want is for my children to respect my decisions. Vincent and Sophia have stayed loyal, while you abandoned ship at the first sign of rough waters. They've stayed to loot the company from within. They're negotiating personal deals with Cambridge Investments, while preparing to sell the entire group at a fraction of its value." This information genuinely seemed to surprise him. "What are you talking about?" I explained the planned sale, showing him preliminary agreements I'd obtained through Patricia. He shook his head. "Cambridge has assured me this is a strategic partnership, not an acquisition." Vincent recommended them highly. Of course he did. They're paying him handsomely under the table. I showed him the draft consulting agreements for both Vincent and Sophia with Cambridge, effective immediately after the proposed sale. For a moment, doubt clouded my father's expression. Then his defenses rose again. "These could be fabricated. You have every reason to turn me against your siblings. Call Cambridge yourself. Ask them directly about their post-acquisition plans for the properties and staff. See if they deny it." He stared at me, jaw clenched. "I think this meeting is over. I'll look into your allegations, but I won't be manipulated into turning against the children who've remained faithful to this company." "Faithful?" I couldn't contain my incredulity. "They're destroying everything you've built." "And you abandoned it," he shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. "You walked away when I needed you most. After your mother died." He stopped, composing himself. Vincent and Sophia stepped up. They took on responsibility while you pursued your own interests. I realized then that in his mind, my departure had been the ultimate betrayal. Not because the company needed my skills, but because he had needed someone to fill the void Eleanor left. Instead of processing his grief, he had poured himself into the business, expecting his children to do the same. Vincent and Sophia had recognized this need and exploited it, while I had chosen independence. "I'm trying to help now," I said more gently. "Before it's too late. I don't need your help." He straightened papers on his desk, signaling dismissal. "I'll see you at Christmas dinner if you still plan to attend. Until then, I suggest you focus on your own career and leave Reynolds' business to those who've earned the right to make decisions." I left the folder on his desk as I departed, hoping against hope that he would review the evidence objectively once his anger subsided. But I wasn't counting on it. News of my meeting with Father spread quickly through family channels. That evening, Vincent called, his voice slurring slightly from what I assumed was his typical 3-martini dinner. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he demanded, without preamble. "Having a conversation with our father about the company's future. Stay out of things that don't concern you." The threat in his tone was unmistakable. "You gave up your right to an opinion when you walked out. The livelihood of thousands of employees concerns me. The legacy our parents built concerns me." Vincent laughed harshly. Always the bleeding heart. Let me make this crystal clear. If you continue interfering, I'll sue you personally for corporate espionage and defamation. How do you think Meridian would react to their golden boy being dragged through legal proceedings? Before I could respond, he hung up. Minutes later, an email arrived from Sophia's attorney, formally warning me against making false and defamatory statements regarding her professional conduct, with copies sent to my employer's legal department. The next day, Bianca called in tears. Unlike our other siblings, she seemed genuinely distressed rather than threatening. "Why are you doing this?" she sobbed. "Everything was fine until you started stirring up trouble." Dad's upset. Vincent's furious. Sophia's talking about restraining orders. "Bianca, the company is in serious trouble. I'm trying to prevent a complete collapse." "That's not true. Vincent says our profits are up this quarter. We're expanding into Dubai next year." I sighed, realizing she was completely in the dark about the company's actual condition. "Bianca, when was the last time you saw actual financial statements? Not summaries from Vincent or Sophia, but real numbers?" Her silence was telling. The company's bleeding money. The Dubai project exists only on paper. Vincent and Sophia are planning to sell everything to Cambridge Investments right after Christmas. "I don't believe you," she whispered. But doubt had crept into her voice. "Ask to see the real books. Request the correspondence with Cambridge. You're a board member, Bianca. You have both the right and responsibility to know what's happening." After a long pause, she said, "I need to go," and disconnected. A family meeting was hastily convened the following week at my father's estate. I received the invitation with surprise, taking it as a potentially positive sign that my warnings had registered. That hope evaporated the moment I walked into the formal dining room. My father sat at the head of the table, flanked by Vincent and Sophia. Bianca perched nervously at the far end, avoiding eye contact. Two unfamiliar men in expensive suits occupied the remaining chairs. "Dakota," my father began without pleasantries, "since you've expressed such concern about our corporate strategy, I thought you should hear directly from our partners at Cambridge Investments." The older of the two men extended his hand. "Martin Webster, CEO of Cambridge. Your father speaks highly of your business acumen, despite your differences." I doubted that very much, but shook his hand. "I'm curious about your plans for Reynolds Hotels post-acquisition." Webster exchanged glances with my father. "We prefer the term strategic partnership, but to answer your question, we see tremendous untapped potential in the Reynolds portfolio. Some restructuring will be necessary, of course." "Restructuring," I repeated. "You mean selling off the prime properties for real estate value, stripping the others of assets, and discarding the brand once it's been hollowed out? That's Cambridge's typical approach, isn't it?" Webster's professional smile didn't waver. "We tailor our approach to each unique situation." "And what about the employees? The thousands of people whose livelihoods depend on these hotels?" The second Cambridge executive spoke up. "Market realities sometimes necessitate workforce optimization." "Workforce optimization," I echoed. "Corporate speak for mass layoffs." Vincent leaned forward. "This is exactly why we didn't include you in these discussions. You're allowing sentimentality to cloud business judgment. Is sentimentality the problem? Or is it the consulting contracts you and Sophia have negotiated with Cambridge after the sale goes through?" Silence fell over the room. My father's gaze darted to Vincent, who maintained impressive composure. "That's absurd," Vincent said smoothly, "and potentially slanderous." I addressed my father directly. "Ask them, right now. Ask if they've discussed retaining Vincent and Sophia as consultants after the acquisition." For a moment, I thought he might actually do it. Then Sophia interjected. "This is ridiculous. Dakota abandoned the company, and now he returns spreading paranoid conspiracy theories because he's jealous of our success. The Cambridge executives shifted uncomfortably. Webster checked his watch. Perhaps we should reconvene when family matters have been resolved. There's nothing to resolve, my father stated firmly. The board will vote on the Cambridge proposal as planned on December 26th. Dakota's concerns have been noted but are based on incomplete information and personal bias. The meeting concluded shortly after, with nothing resolved. As we dispersed, Bianca caught up to me in the hallway. Did you mean what you said? About Vincent and Sophia having secret contracts? I nodded. I've seen the drafts. They each stand to make millions, while everyone else loses everything. Her eyes widened. Including me? Especially you. You're the only one with no leverage. Father's stake will be bought out. Vincent and Sophia have arranged their golden parachutes. You'll be left with worthless shares in a gutted company. She bit her lip, conflict evident in her expression. I don't know what to believe anymore. I handed her my card. Call me if you want to see the evidence yourself. She never called. Instead, the battle lines hardened over the following weeks. My father refused further meetings. Vincent accelerated the Cambridge negotiations. Sophia launched a whisper campaign within the industry, suggesting I was unstable and vindictive. By mid-December, it was clear conventional approaches had failed. If I wanted to save Reynolds Hotels, I would need to take drastic action. The annual Christmas dinner, with all key players present and the board vote looming, would be my final opportunity. I just needed to assemble the resources for one very unconventional corporate takeover. With the Christmas deadline approaching, I needed allies and leverage. My first call was to Jackson Taylor, my boss at Meridian. I need to take emergency personal leave, I explained in his office, having secured a confidential meeting. Family crisis. Jackson studied me with the shrewd assessment that had made him a successful CEO. This wouldn't have anything to do with the rumors that Reynolds Hotels is on the verge of a distressed sale. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. It has everything to do with that. To my surprise, he nodded understandingly. I've heard concerning things about their financial management. Your family name is still on the building, Dakota. That's precisely why I need to intervene. Jackson leaned back. Take whatever time you need. Just understand one thing clearly. Meridian cannot be involved in any way. Whatever you're planning stays completely separate from this company. Absolutely. This is personal, not professional. Good. Because professionally, I should remind you that attempting to undermine a competitor's legitimate business transaction could be seen as corporate interference. His emphasis on professionally told me what I needed to know. Jackson was giving me room to operate as long as Meridian remained insulated from any fallout. My next call was to Marcus Delaney, a brilliant corporate attorney who had helped Meridian navigate several complex acquisitions. I met him at his home on a Sunday morning to ensure privacy. Let me get this straight, Marcus said after I'd outlined the situation. You want to prevent your family's company from being acquired by blocking the sale, possibly by acquiring controlling interest yourself, despite having no current position or authority within the organization? That's a fair summary. He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. The legal challenges are substantial. You'd need extraordinary leverage or capital. I'm working on both, I assured him. What I need to know is, if I can secure the financial backing, what's the most efficient way to gain control and stop the Cambridge deal? Marcus thought carefully. Given the time constraints, your best approach might be to acquire the company's debt rather than equity. From what you've described, Reynolds Hotels has significant outstanding loans that are likely in or near technical default. This aligned with Howard's findings. Go on. If you control the debt, you essentially control the company's fate. You could call the loans due, forcing either immediate repayment or reorganization on your terms. Would that be enough to block the Cambridge acquisition? Almost certainly. No buyer wants to inherit contested debt with an aggressive creditor. The risk of immediate bankruptcy proceedings would kill the deal. This strategy had the advantage of speed. Buying shares would require board approval and disclosure filings. Purchasing debt could happen discreetly through third parties. I'll need substantial capital, I acknowledged. More than I personally have available. Marcus nodded. You'll need investors who trust your judgment and share your vision for saving rather than dismantling the company. I have some ideas, I said, already mentally listing potential allies in the industry. The next week became a blur of discreet meetings, rapid financial modeling, and tense negotiations. I approached select investors with impeccable reputations, people who had expressed admiration for the Reynolds legacy and concern about Cambridge's business practices. Harrison Montgomery, a veteran hotelier who had sold his regional chain to retire, became my first backer. I've watched what private equity does to good companies, he said, committing $20 million. And I've known your mother. She deserved better than having her life's work carved up for parts. Eliza Cheng, who had partnered with my mother on various charitable initiatives, contributed another $15 million. Eleanor always said you were the heart of the family business, she told me. Prove her right. Through Marcus's connections, I secured meetings with 3 hedge funds, specializing in distressed assets, but known for responsible restructuring rather than slash-and-burn tactics. 2 declined, citing the tight timeline and family complications. The third, Westbrook Partners, committed $30 million in exchange for board representation post-restructuring. By December 23rd, I had assembled nearly $70 million, enough to acquire the primary debt obligations of Reynolds Hotels from increasingly nervous lenders. Through shell companies established by Marcus, we purchased loan packages at discounts from banks concerned about imminent default. Within 72 hours, my investment group controlled over 80% of Reynolds Hotels' outstanding debt, giving us effective veto power over any major transaction. The pieces were in place, but executing the plan carried enormous personal risk. I had invested every dollar of my own savings and leveraged my reputation with influential industry figures. If this failed, my career and financial security would be destroyed alongside my family relationships. The night before Christmas Eve, I sat alone in my apartment, reviewing the final details with Marcus over the phone. All the paperwork is in order, he confirmed. At your signal, we can transfer all accounts to the secured holding company, effectively freezing operations until our conditions are met. What's the worst-case scenario? I asked, needing to hear it explicitly. Marcus didn't sugarcoat it. Your father could fight this in court. Expensive litigation, potentially lasting years. Cambridge could sue for tortious interference. Your siblings might pursue personal claims against you. Professionally, you'd likely become radioactive in the industry, regardless of the legal outcome. And the best case, your father recognizes the reality of the situation and agrees to the restructuring plan. Cambridge withdraws. You install new management and begin rebuilding the company properly. I thanked him and ended the call, staring out at the city lights. The weight of what I was about to do felt crushing. I was risking everything: finances, career, what remained of family relationships, on this one desperate gamble. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Bianca, are you really coming tomorrow? I replied simply. Yes. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, things are weird here. Dad's on edge. Vincent and Sophia are acting strange. I waited, sensing more was coming. I looked into what you said. About Cambridge. About the contracts. You were right. My heart raced. What will you do? Another long pause. I don't know yet. But I'll see you tomorrow. It wasn't an explicit alliance, but it was something, a crack in the united front my siblings had maintained against me. Sleep eluded me that night. I kept reviewing the plan, identifying potential points of failure, rehearsing what I would say. The confrontation ahead would be brutal. There would be no walking back from this, no possibility of pretending it was a misunderstanding. By morning, I felt eerily calm, like a swimmer who has swum too far from shore to turn back. The only option was to keep moving forward and hope for the strength to reach the distant beach. I dressed carefully for dinner. Conservative dark suit, subtle tie, my mother's cufflinks for courage. Before leaving, I made the final call to activate our plan. Execute Phase 1. I instructed Marcus. Within the hour, the financial noose began tightening around Reynolds hotels. The accounts we now controlled through debt acquisition were secured. Electronic transfers would require dual authentication, effectively freezing significant funds. Credit lines were suspended, pending review. By the time I arrived at my father's estate for Christmas dinner, Reynolds Luxury Hotels was running on financial fumes, though only a handful of people knew it. I parked my car at the end of the long driveway, taking a moment to prepare myself. The grand house was decorated lavishly as always. Thousands of twinkling lights, massive wreaths, a 20-foot Christmas tree visible through the windows. The annual display of wealth and tradition continued despite the company crumbling beneath its foundation. Taking a deep breath, I approached the house where everything had begun, and where everything was about to change irrevocably. Whatever happened inside those walls tonight, the Reynolds family would never be the same again. The butler who opened the door did a double take before regaining his professional composure. "Mr. Dakota, welcome home," he said, accepting my coat. "The family is gathering in the main salon." The house smelled of pine, cinnamon, and roasting meat, the familiar sense of Christmas that briefly transported me to happier times. Holiday music played softly from the hidden speaker system my father had installed during one of his technology upgrades. The massive Christmas tree in the foyer glittered with ornaments collected over decades, including the childish creations we had made in school that my mother had insisted on displaying alongside the expensive decorations. I paused before a framed family photograph taken perhaps 15 years earlier. We were all smiling, arranged artfully on the grand staircase, my mother radiant at the center. It struck me how long it had been since I had seen genuine smiles in this house. Voices drifted from the salon, the murmur of conversation punctuated by the occasional forced laugh. Taking a steadying breath, I entered the room. The conversation halted abruptly. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me with expressions ranging from shock to hostility. My father stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand. Vincent and Sophia flanked him like royal courtiers. Bianca perched nervously on a settee, while the Cambridge executives, Webster and his associate, occupied armchairs with the comfortable posture of men who believed they already owned the room. "Dakota," my father broke the silence. "I wasn't certain you would come. I wouldn't miss our family tradition," I replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. Vincent scoffed audibly. "Suddenly, traditions matter." "To you?" I ignored him, addressing the group. "Merry Christmas, everyone. Mr. Webster, I'm surprised to see you here. I wouldn't have expected business associates at a family gathering." Webster smiled thinly. "Your father kindly suggested we might enjoy experiencing the legendary Reynolds hospitality firsthand before finalizing our arrangement." "How thoughtful," I said, noting how he emphasized finalizing. Clearly, they believed the deal was all but completed. The next hour unfolded in excruciating slow motion. We maintained a veneer of civilized conversation, while tension simmered beneath every exchange. The Cambridge executives shared stories about their families and holiday plans. Vincent boasted about a recent skiing trip to Aspen. Sophia discussed her plans to redecorate her Hamptons house. My father watched me constantly, suspicion evident in his gaze. Only Bianca seemed genuinely uncomfortable, fidgeting with her jewelry and drinking more wine than usual. Twice, she started to speak privately to me, only to be intercepted by Sophia with some urgent question or comment. Dinner was announced precisely at 7. We processed into the formal dining room, where the massive table gleamed with the family silver and finest china. The centerpiece was an elaborate arrangement of white orchids and red roses that would have cost thousands. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, and servers stood at attention along the walls. All this opulence while the company that funded it teetered on collapse. The irony wasn't lost on me. Conversation during the first courses remained deliberately superficial. The weather, holiday travel chaos, the chef's excellent preparation of the beef Wellington. Beneath this mundane exchange, I could feel my father's impatience growing. He had never been one for small talk, preferring to drive straight to business matters. Finally, as dessert was being served, he set down his fork with deliberate precision. "I believe we've observed social niceties long enough," he announced. "We have important matters to discuss before tomorrow's board meeting." The servants were dismissed with a wave of his hand. When the door closed behind the last one, my father's demeanor transformed from polite host to corporate dictator. "As you all know, tomorrow the board will vote on Cambridge's offer to acquire Reynolds Luxury Hotels. The paperwork is prepared, and I expect unanimous approval." His gaze fixed on me. "All board members will support this decision for the good of the company." Vincent smirked, raising his wine glass. "To new beginnings and profitable partnerships." "Before we toast," I said calmly, "I'd like to understand exactly what we're celebrating. The sale of our family legacy at 40 cents on the dollar? The termination of thousands of loyal employees? Or perhaps the personal consulting contracts that Vincent and Sophia have negotiated for themselves while the rest of the company burns?" Silence crashed over the table. Sophia's knuckles whitened around her fork. Vincent's face flushed dark red. "Dakota," my father warned. "This is neither the time nor place for your unfounded accusations." Unfounded? I removed my phone from my pocket. Should I read the draft consulting agreements aloud? The ones guaranteeing Vincent and Sophia each $2 million annually for 5 years regardless of performance metrics? Or perhaps the internal Cambridge memo, discussing which properties to sell immediately after acquisition, and which to strip before discarding. Webster cleared his throat. "I'm not sure where you've obtained what you believe to be internal documents. But I can assure you—" "Save it," I interrupted. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Webster. 12 companies acquired, 12 companies dismantled, thousands of jobs eliminated. You're not strategic partners. You're corporate scavengers." My father slammed his hand on the table, causing the crystal to jump. "That's enough. You've been spreading these conspiracy theories for weeks without evidence. Cambridge is offering fair value considering our current financial position." "Our current financial position," I repeated. "Let's discuss that. The company is over-leveraged, bleeding cash, and teetering on technical default of multiple loan covenants. Vincent and Sophia have systematically looted the accounts while you looked the other way. But rather than fix these problems, you're selling at a discount to vulture capitalists who will destroy everything you and Mother built." "You have no right," Vincent began. "I have every right," I countered. "As a Reynolds, as Mother's son, and now, as your primary creditor." The confusion on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. "Over the past 2 weeks, my investment group has acquired 80% of Reynolds Hotel's outstanding debt. We control your credit lines, your operating accounts, and your ability to complete any significant transaction." Disbelief gave way to fury, as understanding dawned on my father's face. "That's impossible." "Check your phone, Dad," I suggested. "Call the bank. Try to authorize a transfer from any of the primary accounts. You'll find you no longer have unilateral access." Vincent was already frantically working his phone, face paling as he presumably discovered the truth of my claim. "What have you done?" he whispered. "Prevented you from destroying this company." I turned to the Cambridge executives. "Gentlemen, I regret to inform you that Reynolds Hotels will not be available for acquisition. Any attempt to proceed with this transaction will trigger immediate calls for repayment of all outstanding loans, forcing the company into bankruptcy protection before your deal can close. Webster and his colleague exchanged glances, their professional masks slipping to reveal clear displeasure. "This is highly irregular," Webster said carefully, "and potentially actionable interference with a business transaction." "Sue me," I replied. "But first, consider whether litigation with an aggressive creditor who controls your target's debt is the best use of Cambridge's resources. There are easier targets for your particular business model." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You've gone behind my back, conspired with outsiders, and attempted to hijack my company? Your own family's business? I've saved the company from your poor judgment and their greed," I corrected, gesturing toward Vincent and Sophia. "The choice now is simple. We can restructure internally, restore proper management, and rebuild what's been damaged. Or we can fight through years of ugly litigation while the company disintegrates around us." Sophia, ever the strategist, was already calculating her position. "This is a bluff. You couldn't possibly have raised enough capital to acquire our debt. Harrison Montgomery, Eliza Cheng, Westbrook Partners, I listed some of my backers. People who respected what this company once stood for and want to see it restored rather than dismantled." Recognition flickered in my father's eyes. He had history with these names, respected figures in the industry, former friends and colleagues. "Dad, check your personal accounts too," I added quietly. His expression shifted from anger to confusion as he accessed his banking app. The blood drained from his face as he stared at the screen. "Zero," he murmured. "How?" "The personal guarantees you signed on the company's credit facilities," I explained. "They've been called due to covenant violations. Your personal assets were collateral, and they've been secured pending resolution." Vincent shot to his feet. "This is theft. Extortion. This is business," I replied evenly. "The same cutthroat approach you've always championed, Vincent. The difference is, I'm using it to save the company, not strip it for parts." Bianca, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. "What happens now?" It was the question everyone needed answered. The Cambridge executives were already mentally calculating their exit strategy. Vincent and Sophia were realizing their golden parachutes had failed to deploy. My father was confronting the reality that his empire had slipped from his grasp. "Now we decide what kind of company Reynolds Hotels will be going forward," I said. "I propose a complete restructuring. New executive leadership, financial controls, operational overhauls focused on quality and sustainability rather than short-term profit extraction." "And who exactly would lead this new vision?" my father asked bitterly. "You? I've assembled a transition team of industry veterans who can stabilize operations while we determine permanent leadership. I'm not interested in a power grab, Father. I'm interested in saving what matters: the company's legacy, its employees, and yes, our family's name." "What about us?" Sophia demanded. "Are you pushing us out completely?" "That depends on your willingness to contribute positively, rather than continuing to treat the company as your personal ATM. There could be appropriate roles for each of you, with proper oversight and accountability." Vincent scoffed. "You expect us to work under your supervision? To report to you like common employees? I expect you to earn your positions through actual contribution rather than birthright, just as I've had to do elsewhere." The Cambridge executives had heard enough. Webster stood, buttoning his jacket. "I believe our business here is concluded. We'll be withdrawing our offer effective immediately." "A wise decision," I acknowledged. "My attorneys will ensure any confidential information you've obtained is returned or destroyed." As they departed, escorted by a confused butler, the family tableau remained frozen in various states of shock and calculation. My father stared into his empty glass, perhaps seeing the reflection of his failures there. Vincent and Sophia exchanged furious whispers, no doubt plotting their next move. Bianca watched me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, something between awe and apprehension. "You've backed us into a corner," my father finally said. "What exactly do you want from us?" "I want what Mother would have wanted," I replied. "A company that honors its commitments to employees, delivers exceptional experiences to guests, and creates sustainable value rather than quick profits. A family that respects rather than undermines each other." Is that really so unreasonable? No one had an immediate answer. The magnificent Christmas dinner sat forgotten on fine china as the future of Reynolds Hotels hung in the delicate balance of that silent moment. The weeks following that fateful Christmas dinner were among the most challenging of my life. Restructuring a failing company while navigating fractured family dynamics required every ounce of resilience and patience I possessed. My father's initial reaction was wounded pride, masked as righteous indignation. He refused to speak to me directly for 8 days, communicating only through attorneys. Vincent threatened lawsuits, criminal charges, even physical retaliation during one particularly heated phone call. Sophia attempted to rally board members against me, painting my intervention as a hostile takeover rather than a rescue operation. Only Bianca approached the situation with something resembling openness. "I never realized how bad things had gotten," she admitted during a private lunch 3 days after Christmas. "Vincent and Sophia kept telling me everything was fine, that the company was thriving. They were protecting their interests, not yours," I told her gently. "I should have paid more attention, asked more questions." Her eyes welled with tears. "Mom would be so disappointed in me. Mom would understand. She'd want us moving forward, not dwelling on blame." That conversation marked the first fragile bridge rebuilt within our family. Bianca became an unexpected ally, using her social connections to reassure partners and clients that the company's turbulence was temporary and positive changes were coming. The breakthrough with my father came almost a month later. I had established temporary offices in the Reynolds building, working with a transition team to assess the company's true condition. Late one evening, he appeared in my doorway, looking older and wearier than I had ever seen him. "You were right," he said without preamble. "About Vincent and Sophia. About Cambridge. About all of it." The admission clearly cost him dearly. William Reynolds had built his identity around being infallible, always the smartest person in any room. "I never wanted to be right about this," I replied. "I just couldn't stand by while the company collapsed." He entered slowly, surveying the reorganization plans spread across my desk. "You've been working around the clock. There's a lot to fix." He nodded, hands clasped behind his back as he examined the financial projections. "Your mother always said you had the heart for this business, that you understood it wasn't just about profit margins." "She taught me that," I acknowledged. "She taught all of you. The others chose not to listen." He turned to face me directly. "I failed her, Dakota. Failed her vision for this company. Failed you, too." The vulnerability in his admission stunned me. My father had never apologized for anything in his life. "It's not too late," I offered. "We can still save what matters." That conversation became the foundation for a new relationship, not immediately warm or easy, but based on mutual respect rather than power struggles. My father stepped back from day-to-day operations, but remained as chairman emeritus, focusing on client relationships where his reputation still carried weight. Vincent and Sophia proved more challenging. Vincent initially refused any role that wasn't at the executive level, eventually accepting a position overseeing a single regional market where his client relationships were strongest. With clear accountability measures and no access to financial controls, he gradually demonstrated he could add value when properly motivated. Sophia's marketing talent, when directed toward actual company promotion rather than personal enrichment schemes, proved surprisingly effective. Under supervision and with transparent budgeting, she revitalized the brand image that had suffered during the decline. The company itself required intensive care. We discovered the situation was even worse than my initial investigation had indicated. Deferred maintenance had created safety issues in multiple properties. Staff morale had collapsed under cost-cutting measures. Vendor relationships had deteriorated from late payments and broken commitments. Rebuilding took time, investment, and consistent leadership. I split my weeks between Reynolds and Meridian for 6 months, until both boards agreed I needed to choose one company to lead. The decision, ultimately, wasn't difficult. Reynolds needed me more, and fulfilling my promise to my mother mattered more than my personal career trajectory. 3 years after that Christmas confrontation, Reynolds' luxury hotels had not only stabilized, but begun to thrive again. We had closed 4 underperforming properties, renovated 12 others, and actually expanded into 2 new markets with carefully considered investments. Employee satisfaction scores had risen from the bottom quartile of the industry to the top 15%. Guest reviews reflected the renewed commitment to quality over cost-cutting. More meaningful than the business metrics was the healing within our family. We would never be the perfect unit portrayed in those old Christmas card photos, but we had developed something perhaps more valuable: honest relationships based on authentic contributions rather than manipulation and competition. My father and I developed a tradition of weekly dinners, where we discussed everything from business strategies to personal philosophies. The man who had been emotionally unavailable throughout my childhood gradually revealed depths of thought and feeling I had never imagined he possessed. "Your mother would be proud," he told me during one such dinner, on the 5th anniversary of my return to the company. "Not just of the business success, but of how you handled all of us. You could have destroyed your siblings, taken complete control. Instead, you found ways to include everyone, to give second chances." "I learned that from her," I replied. "She always said the true measure of success is how you treat people, especially when you have power over them." The most profound lesson from this ordeal wasn't about business strategy or family dynamics, though I learned plenty about both. It was about the courage to stand alone when necessary, to risk everything for principles that matter. Had I simply accepted my father's decision that Christmas, thousands of people would have lost their livelihoods. Our family legacy would have been dismantled for quick profit. The values my mother embodied would have been betrayed. Sometimes, protecting what matters requires confronting those you love most. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the only right ones. And sometimes, when you stand firm in your principles even as everyone opposes you, you create the opportunity for healing that would otherwise never have been possible. The journey from that Christmas dinner confrontation to today has transformed me as much as it transformed our company. I've learned that true strength isn't domination, but the willingness to extend grace after standing your ground. That legacy isn't measured in buildings or bank accounts, but in lives touched and values honored. That family can be rebuilt, even from the most broken foundation, when there's sincere commitment to truth and reconciliation. As I reflect on this chapter of my life, I'm reminded that our greatest challenges often contain our most important opportunities for growth. Had I walked away, protecting myself but abandoning our company and family, I would have missed the difficult but rewarding work of restoration. Some things, once broken, can become stronger at the mended places if we have the courage to do the mending. Have you ever had to take a difficult stand against people you care about? What helped you find the courage to follow your convictions, even when it meant standing alone? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand firm for what's right, even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the hardest path leads to the most meaningful destination. At Christmas dinner, my dad's shocking announcement changed everything. "You're disinherited." While my siblings high-fived, I calmly told him to check his bank account, revealing a truth that left his face white with shock. This Reddit family drama unfolded after I discovered my father, brother, and sister had been systematically embezzling from my grandfather's company. Following my grandfather's secret contingency plan, I took control of the business, exposing their financial crimes and restoring the company's integrity. This intense Reddit family drama shows how standing up for what's right sometimes means confronting those closest to you. 1 year later. Healing began as my father acknowledged his mistakes, and we rebuilt relationships on honesty rather than obligation. If you've experienced Reddit family drama over inheritance or business conflicts, share your story below. This emotional Reddit family drama demonstrates that sometimes losing the family you thought you had leads to finding your true self. The most powerful Reddit family drama comes when truth finally breaks through years of deception.